Social distancing was the theme of the weekend. Obviously, John Horan went on the Sunday game last night and spoke about the fact that the GAA won't be coming back until social distancing is not a factor. And I mean, obviously, first off, he got a lot of praise for his performance last night. People saying it was a very clear message, very straightforward. They're not going to put on the volunteers of the organisation the responsibility for policing social distancing. And you completely understand that this is an amateur organisation. There had been a school of thought that believed that for local club matches it would actually be not that difficult to keep people in the crowd social distance. Because if you look at the language from the phasing that we've been talking about over the last while, Phase 3 was going to permit behind closed doors sporting activities events where arrangements are in place to enable participants to maintain social distancing. So that's most non-contact sports returning from June 29th. Phase 4 was permit sports team leagues and in brackets, for example, soccer and GAA, but only where limitations are placed on the numbers of spectators and where social distancing can be maintained. Now the language in the recommendation is a little bit flabby there, because is it social distancing for the players in the field or is it social distancing for the people in the crowd? I mean, I'd assumed from the language that it was people in the crowd and that they were actually going to be okay with people bumping into each other on the pitch. And that's where a lot of the concern has come. But if you go back to Dr. Eoin last week, and he was saying there's a difference between contact in a medical sense and a contact sport. A contact sport is not contact in a medical sense. According to the World Health Organization, it's 15 minutes in close contact within a 2-metre radius of somebody who is infected. And it's unlikely that you would have a full 15 minutes in rugby, for example. They were saying maybe GAA is different because actually you'll be marking somebody over the course of 60 minutes in a club game.
Yeah, it's interesting that there is an actual medical professional on the record as saying that there is a clear difference between social distancing on the pitch and social distancing in the stands. It is interesting as well looking at that roadmap document and kind of wondering if that phase 4 line is to do with on the pitch or off the pitch. You get the sense that it is definitely to do with spectators, because when you get into phase 5, it actually specifies that close physical contact games would be permitted. That's the rugby, boxing, wrestling, that sort of thing. But then in the crowd, you would need to have effective social distancing being maintained. So that's the kind of the distinguishment that's been made there. And like I wonder if there is a situation where the GAA do actually consider what other sports bodies might do over the next couple of months and reassess where they're at. Like, there's no question John Horan was clear in where the GAA are at last night, and I think he deserves credit for that. But I think you can probably dig down into the GAA stance as a whole. And like, does a local GAA club have the capabilities of maintaining social distancing in the stands? From what John Horan was saying yesterday, perhaps not every GAA club would have that ability, or perhaps there wouldn't be the trust in the GAA clubs to be able to pull that sort of thing off. Maybe he's right, but maybe you also look at what local businesses are doing all around the country in terms of maintaining social distancing where possible when it comes to queues into their shops or whatever it may be. Are those same abilities, do those same abilities exist within GAA clubs? I would have thought so.
I mean, you could just not have any spectators, and the point about these games is that they're opportunities for the clubs to get back up and begin that process of normalisation, as opposed to, you know, there's not going to be one day where social distancing is stopped and then the next day there's, 80,000 people in a stadium like Croke Park. We're looking at a much reduced crowd at the start in any events in all facets of life. So, look, it does seem like they're buying a little bit of time here and seeing what other sports do. And again, obviously, there are a couple of professional sports on the island that they can look at, see what happens with the League of Ireland, see what happens with rugby, and follow the best guidelines that emerge from them. Or indeed, if no guidelines do emerge, then they realise that they've done the right thing, kicking the whole thing, kicking that can down the road. The other aspect of this, I suppose, is that if you allow small groups to come back in dribs and drabs, they were concerned, I think, about what would happen if one team goes rogue, the video gets shared on WhatsApp, and then all of a sudden it becomes a big story, an outbreak happens in a club, and who is ultimately responsible for that? Again, I suppose this is what the responsibility level that we want matches, everybody wants matches, but actually if you're an organisation, then you need to worry about, well, what are the ramifications, what is the risk assessment here, and what would our insurers say about the fact that we said you could go back in 3s and 4s, that was unpoliceable, at some level, or not really that unpoliceable, but somebody broke guidelines, and an outbreak happened, a cluster happened, and all of a sudden we're getting the blame for it. And who does the blame ultimately land with? And it lands with the people who made the decision to allow everybody to go back. Now, I don't know if it does, actually. I think at some level you need personal responsibility. So if the whatever off-the-ball Gaels decide to go back and have a collective training session, then everybody at that training session is responsible for that, as opposed to the central organisation. But maybe from an insurance perspective, they thought that risk was too great.
Yeah, like I'm not sure whether was insurance mentioned last night as a specific reason for that, but like Horan definitely mentioned that once you give a little bit of rope, there is going to be a greater bit of leeway taken, and if you're allowing 4 people to go back, say for small socially distanced training, would clubs take advantage of that? And as you mentioned, the whole idea of something going viral on social media. Personally, I think that reflects poorly on the club rather than the organisation. Like nobody has been looking at Tottenham Hotspur players in a park in London and pointing the finger at the Premier League. After that, you're kind of pointing the finger at Tottenham Hotspur and Tottenham Hotspur only, and the players involved. And
the players, really? Like even exactly, Spurs, I didn't blame.
But if you want to do a ranking of who's actually responsible, certainly the Premier League would be less responsible than Tottenham Hotspur. But anyway, they're adults. They're actual grown men who can make this decision, who can read, who know the responsibility, who know the implications of this. And maybe there could be a little bit more trust placed in the clubs. But again, you're getting, like the motive of the GAA here is very clearly the welfare of the players and the families of the players. And if they feel that this is the best way for them to protect that, then absolutely fair enough. You just have to have questions about what might happen, or how could there potentially be avenues for the GAA to change their mind, because that for me is one of the key points. And one of the important points that John Horan made last night was that they can move these dates. They can move them forward, they can move them back. And
we'll talk with Sam McConkey about how that might happen at around about 8:30 this morning. Sheahan is with us to bring us through the rest of today's sports news. Shane, good morning to you. How you doing?
Not too bad, lads. Keeping well, and yourselves?
All good. What's going on?
Not a whole pile. Nice sunny morning in Monaghan again here. I haven't been in Dublin since the whole thing really kicked in, so it's kind of been a bit weird normally living in Dublin and being home. It feels like an extended Christmas where the weather is really nice.
Do you feel like a teenager again as a matter of interest? Or like, that first year where you go away to college and you come back and you're like...
Yeah, I'm getting dinners made for me every day, which is... a nice treat. Normally you're spending all this money on food up in Dublin, so it's kind of nice in some ways. I had a new car bought recently as well, and I haven't been able to drive it. So it's sitting there picking up dirt in the front garden as well. So there's pros and cons. But I haven't done anything.
Sorry, I had a new car bought as an interesting tense there. Was this a prize?
No. It was my old one was a 2002 Peugeot that very much reached the end of its existence. So it was forced upon me. But it had to be done. Listen, it's not all bad. I haven't done anything mental with my hair just yet in quarantine. So, there's light at the end of the horizon. Although I'm getting close to it. I'd say I'll probably put a bit of colour into the hair in the next week or two.
What colour?
I was thinking pink or purple, something mental. Which would be very extravagant by modern
there's no
standards.
Point. There's literally no point in that. It's just like you need to do something that might be completely life changing. Go brown, or go silver. Go like what's his name from Mad Men? Like do something that you can actually go, this is what it's going to look like. Or I might, this pink and purple. I'm not having it.
It's too mental. You see,
it's just a waste of an opportunity. It's a wasted opportunity. Yeah. This is like a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for you to be somebody different for a few days, as opposed to, I dyed my hair pink because it was like shave or dye, essentially, which you can get away with anytime you want. Under the cover of charity, you can do that anytime you want. But right now, what you could do is like, what would I look like as a brunette?
Yeah, you see, the shave thing, I wouldn't risk it. I haven't been blessed with the world's greatest hairline, and it doesn't run in my family, so I feel like if I shaved it off...
It's not coming back?
It's not coming back. It's too big a risk to take. Whereas the dye thing is, slightly less a risk.
Or you could go red. See what it's like to be like a proper full-blown redhead as opposed to the strawberry blonde. Anyway, look, there has been a multitude of sports news over the last 24 hours, and people are shouting at their Alexas in the corner, going, "Get the hell on with it." So let's get on with it.
Yeah, well, you've mentioned it already, Ger, but the GAA is where we'll start. So John Horan saying he can't see any games being played again this year while social distancing measures are in place. The GAA president also said the association is looking at losses of 50 million quid if the 2020 intercounty season is wiped out by that COVID-19 pandemic. He was saying yesterday as well on the Sunday game, facilities will remain closed until the 20th of July at the earliest. And he's still against the idea of playing games behind closed doors. He also said the GAA will be prepared to use the first 2 months of next year to finish a 2020 intercounty championship if it doesn't go ahead in October or November. He was kind of, as you mentioned as well, a bit reluctant to talk about the idea of finishing the Allianz Leagues, which is an interesting one. I know Monaghan Kerry was the next one up, Eoin, and you were due another visit up to Inniskeen, so we may not get that day out after all, unfortunately.
God, that is the truly devastating part of this. Like, you could not maintain social distancing in McNeil's pub, though, and for that reason, I'm out and rescheduling this until pubs are back open.
Yeah, makes absolute sense. You've also mentioned the Premier League as well. Plans to resume the season at neutral venues to be discussed further today. Some teams, including Brighton, Watford and Aston Villa, have voiced their concerns at those proposals. When players can return to training in groups, and contract extensions will also be part of those talks. Brighton confirmed yesterday a third player at the club had tested positive for coronavirus. This adds a bit of more confusion to the mix. 2 others contracted COVID-19 earlier on in the pandemic. It is believed they have recovered, but this latest diagnosis will prove further blow to the Premier League's plans to return as well. UEFA will hold more talks today about proposals to reschedule leagues once countries have passed peaks in their pandemics. And they've issued a strong recommendation that domestic campaigns should indeed be finished. France and the Netherlands have already decided to end their seasons because of restrictions put in place by their governments. The Bundesliga, of course, as we've already heard in the last week or so, are due to restart on Saturday, the 16th of May. However, Dynamo Dresden, who play in the second tier of German football, they're currently bottom of that division, have put their entire squad and coaching staff into 2 weeks of isolation after 2 players tested positive over the weekend. They have said they're unable to fulfil their fixtures, so that adds a bit of confusion to the issue in Germany as well. Meanwhile, UEFA is considering plans to shorten the qualification competitions for next season's Champions League and Europa League, or in a worst-case scenario, scrap them altogether. The start of next year's Champions League has already been pushed back to October 20th due to this coronavirus, but there remains uncertainty over whether the qualifying competitions can be scheduled in time. So the current plans are, of course, to complete the season's tournaments by the end of August. That looks quite unlikely as things stand. Some news up in Scotland as well. Inverness say it's bemusing to hear the SPFL claim they have no evidence of bullying during the process which ended leagues below the Premiership early. The Championship Club insists they reported an allegation last month against a Scottish Professional Football League board member. A proposal from Rangers to carry out an independent investigation into the vote will be discussed at a general meeting that will take place tomorrow. So dicey times up in Scotland. Meanwhile, a decision is expected to be made on whether the Dublin Marathon is to be held this week. This story is in the back pages this morning. A key meeting of race organisers is scheduled for Thursday. The 41st running of the event, set for Sunday, October 25th, is a 25,000 entry sellout. The organisers announcing the capacity back in January after announcing a new part lottery system. They received just over 35,000 applications in all. And can I just say, as someone who has ran the Dublin Marathon before, people should be delighted to have an extra year to train for this thing. The Dublin Marathon is not an easy race. I mean, granted, I didn't train for it properly. I was drinking 3 days before the race and didn't quite build up my miles as you're supposed to. But if anyone gets an extra year to train for a Dublin Marathon, count your blessings, because that's it's not an easy thing to run 26.2 miles or whatever it is in 4, 5, 3 hours, however long it is. So
when do we expect that announcement?
That's the meeting is supposed to take place on Thursday of this week, Ger. So hopefully we'll have an indication by Thursday evening, Friday morning on that. So I know there's a lot of people waiting for news on the Dublin Marathon, so you should have it by the end of this week. There is tennis news as well. French Open may have to be held without fans later this year, according to organisers. The tournament was due to be held between the 24th of May and 7th of June. That, of course, is not going to happen. It was pushed back to September. The tennis season was suspended in early March and won't restart until mid-July at the earliest. Wimbledon has already been cancelled, while the status of the US Open, which is scheduled for late August, remains unclear. There is racing returning behind closed doors in France today as well, lads. A 10-race card being held at Longchamp in Paris. Racing in France has been on hold since St. Patrick's Day. And we did have sport returning over the weekend, of course, you may have seen. The first major event in the US since March behind closed doors. That was UFC 249. Justin Gaethje claimed victory in the main contest in Florida. The highlight of the weekend, Dana White fist bumping and shaking hands and hugging all the athletes. So interesting times. But yeah, it seems quite soon for UFC to be returning, given the very nature of the sport and how close the competitors are. But look, it's back. I should as well point you to the offtheball.com, and one of the articles we have this morning is Tommy Rooney's love-in for Sean Boylan. He says Sean Boylan's greatness carved into stone. So my argument is that Tommy's actually, he's not a full Meath man. He's kind of a hybrid Cavan, Monaghan, Meath man. He lives in Meath, of course. He could kick a football though into his Cavan neighbours from his garden, and he went to school in Monaghan. So, you know, he could potentially be putting forward an argument for any of those three counties. And look, Banty McEnany has to be in the conversation, surely, as former Meath manager. All
right, Shane, on that note, credibility shot. Thanks very much for joining us this morning. That's Sheahan. He was talking about Tommy, obviously, being a hybrid as opposed to Sean Boylan, who's 100% carved from Meath stock. And we're going to talk about that on the Met Rushmore for Meath, which is up for discussion today. Here's what's coming up on the show. I'm going to speak with Professor Sam McConkey in just a little while to get some reaction to the GAA stance that there won't be any action until social distancing is gone, essentially, and what that implications of that are. That's coming your way in about 15 minutes' time. After that, we're going to speak with Ronan O'Gara. I've got a How's the Head for you this morning from somebody working on the front line. And Mount Rushmore is Meath. Hector Hiocagon is going to edit Tommy Rooney's selections. A lot of people coming in already with suggestions. Boylan, O'Rourke, Gordon Elliott, and then an absolute scrap for the last spot. Brendan says, have to push to get at least 2 horse racing faces on there, Hector. Very hard to decide. But I'd maybe go for Johnny Murtagh for flat and Tom Draper for jumps, as it's impossible to pick between the jumps jockeys. Yeah, a lot of opinion on that one. 087 9 180 is the number. Time for the papers.
OTB AM.
And indeed, Tommy's love letter to Sean Boylan with a brilliant picture is the lead story on offtheball.com this morning. Meath's Mount Rushmore, Sean Boylan's greatness carved into stone. No suggestion yet as to who else Tommy is going to put up yet. It didn't kind of leak out, but I suspect it's going to be 4 footballers, given Tommy's background, and then Hector will have to stick in one of his racing buddies. He would destroy me. Damien Delaney talking about Roy Keane's management. Apparently, Roy Keane went harder on Damien Delaney than a lot of others because he was from Cork. Doesn't sound like the best form of management. People thought I was a Scrooge. Damien Delaney on Premier League wages, again talking about how he actually managed to look after his money properly and buy a house for his ma. And Ole Gunnar Solskjaer likens Roy Keane to Michael Jordan. So we haven't talked about Michael Jordan yet. Have you seen the 2 episodes? Have you stayed up?
No, I'll be watching it. I'll be watching it legally this morning, sure.
That they only break in this part of the world this morning, do they?
Yeah, exactly. I wouldn't dare try and put my head above the parapet and try and seek something out that I shouldn't be. I think people have. I think there's been plenty of leaks weeks ahead. I think if you wanted to get to the end of this, you possibly could find a way online of getting to it. But no, I haven't seen it this week. So we'll be recording that this afternoon for tomorrow morning. That's off the bull, of course.
Yeah, looking forward to that. It's been great stuff so far. Kieran Donaghy, Jarlath Regan, Ronan Mullen and Eoin bringing you immediate reaction and analysis of what's been happening in The Last Dance. So first paper for us this morning.
The Irish Independent leads with a picture of a youngster, Tyg Savage is his name, age 3, pucking a sliotar outside Walsh Park, which was yesterday due to host the Munster Senior Hurling Championship opener between Waterford and Tipperary. Eamon Sweeney then, the summer that might have been, rather. He's writing about all the games that possibly could have taken place that we won't see now this summer. And then the main story, Horan says GAA can't return while social distancing stays in place. President insists members won't be asked to police guidelines as association faces €50 million loss. And this is kind of the other thing that came from last night, Ger, is the fact that John Horan has kind of put a figure on that, the whole €50 million loss of the association. And it just kind of struck me as well over the course of the weekend, like the financial impact and the added burden that this would put on people when they actually want to come back to giving their money to the GAA. Because, like, I guess it's a little over 12 months at this point, we were having debates around GAA ticket prices and them being hiked up at the start of 2019. And there was a lot of division over that, about the idea of whether or not to actually bring them up. But there was a justification on that. The GAA figured that the economy was in rude health and that people could perhaps afford to give an extra tenner or whatever it was for a championship match ticket. and give money back to the communities in that way, I would just have serious concerns about whether or not the people will automatically return through the turnstiles once things get back up and running and things return to normal. Because on top of all of this, you've got people, I would imagine, and households in particular, who now realise how perhaps some of their expenditure had been outrageous during this whole boom is back phase. Now that the pubs are closed, now that sporting events aren't running, I'd imagine that there are people looking at themselves thinking, how was I spending so much money in certain cases? And like, I wonder, it's perhaps a conversation for another day and a conversation for another show, but perhaps that is another thing that sport might have to deal with down the line, the economical impact, not just of the recession that's coming down the lines, but perhaps of a rethink in personal spending.
Well, they go hand in hand. Obviously, consumer sentiment is going to be very, very weak. And when that happens, spending contracts, and that kind of makes recessions worse, and that's what we're looking at. So next for me is the Irish Examiner. There's been a lot of long-form pieces coming from Anthony Daly over the course of the last 5 or 6 weeks, and they've all been great. This one is about Cork this week. We look at Cork differently now. They're no longer the feared machine they once were. Obviously, his rivalry with Cork goes back a long time. Famously, they were looking over at Donlogue. It was in '99 when Donlogue and that bunch of kids came through and won All Ireland for Cork, and he was the one going, we're Cork. And James O'Connor and the rest of the Clare lads were kind of looking over them going, what's going on? Who are these guys? And then obviously they were All Ireland champions very soon after that. So, and also the Cork GAA mourns the passing of John T. O'Leary, who was synonymous with the sombrero, and a bunch of bandmates as well who would have travelled the country in Cork gear that I think everybody would have been familiar with at various stages over the last while as well. And then obviously they've gone, Horan admits 50 million hit to GAA, fears 50 million hit to GAA and admits return of games unlikely is the story there. We'll talk a bit more about that in a couple of minutes.
Photograph on the back of the London Times of horse racing returning to Longchamp today. The main story, Brighton test adds to fears over restart. Club confirms that third player has coronavirus, and kind of similar to how it's been in Germany. You've got a situation where there is a return to play on the horizon, but there is also multiple positive tests coming on stream as well. Things have been shut down for Dynamo Dresden for the next 2 weeks, obviously. Whether or not that'll obviously be the case for Brighton, but they don't have, if they were back in collective training, obviously the severity of that would have been graver. And also if there had actually been fixtures coming up, say, this weekend. So interesting to see if that actually tempers what the Premier League want to do. They're meeting via video conference today. It seems like we've had countless D-Day showdown talks, whatever way you want to build this up. Today is the latest in these talks between the 20 clubs.
Front page of the Irish Times sports section this morning is association facing 50 million loss. Horan. Now, it's a loss of revenue as opposed to a loss. So they're not spending 50 million and then going 50 million to the red. It's a loss of revenue that they would have had. Just the language isn't the language of economics, or accounting rather. Just to clarify that point as well. Malachy Clerkin is about Kyle Walker, who for the second time has broken lockdown restrictions and wrote an impassioned plea about privacy for his family. Apparently paparazzi were camped outside his sister's place, which I think Kyle Walker can be an asshole for breaching lockdown and can also have his privacy respected. So these two things are not mutually exclusive. The newspapers who were camped outside his sister's house are also assholes, and that needs to be recognised at the same time as the fact that Kyle Walker's an asshole for breaking lockdown. Remember, obviously, Kyle Walker had already broken lockdown previously and had been rapped on the knuckles for his night of passion, as it was. This was visiting family members. So anyway, Dublin Marathon set to decide its fate, and then there's that picture which seems... You know that footage that they have of old matches where the crowd and the terrace surge forward whenever there's a goal, or they surge back, depending on... And you look at it and you go, wow, look how weird that footage looks, because there's no safe standing. There's, it's pre-Hillsborough, it's pre the Taylor report, and it looks wild. And it's the same crowd scenes that you would see from big matches in Ireland in the 50s and 60s, either in Talca Park or Dalymount, or indeed sometimes in Croker as well, if the match was big enough to have a sellout. And now you look at pictures of people running in a marathon and you go, wow, that looks so wild, except this isn't black and white footage. This is a picture from last year's marathon, and it's so difficult to see us ever looking at this again, standing at the side of the road and cheering 35,000 or 29,000 or whatever the figure is, people huddled together for a number of kilometres. It's so difficult for us to imagine getting back to that situation and thinking, yeah, let's do this. Unless, of course, you're also American, in which case, you're going to be doing this next weekend.
You're also retrospectively looking at old footage, and it's not even sports events. Like, I was watching Curb Your Enthusiasm yesterday, and Larry David shakes somebody's hand, and like I kind of get a giggle out of it. I'm like, that's hilarious. He's obviously trying to play up the whole character that he's not a particularly nice person. Then I realized, hold on a minute, what are you doing? This is not coronavirus television, but like it will not come back for a long time. The good old firm handshake will no longer be a way of judging somebody's character as a first impression anymore.
Yeah, I mean, there's like definitely winners and losers when it comes to that. 0879 180 180 is the number if you want to get in touch with us this morning. Remember, Mount Rushmore coming your way just after 9:15 this morning. Hector Hukagon will be editing Tommy Rooney's selection. If you've got, it's about me, if you've got any opinions on that. Ron O'Gara coming your way at 8:45. And Sam McConkey coming your way in 2 minutes. Owen, what's next?
The Irish Mirror leads with horrible, with HOR in red, regarding John Horan's surname, I'd assume. John warns of €50 million hole in GAA coffers as he accepts championship, looks dead. Chelsea eye Rice to replace Real target Kante, meanwhile. So Real Madrid are interested in signing N'Golo Kante. If he leaves Chelsea, they want to bring in Declan Rice. You've got the story there of a third Brighton player testing positive for coronavirus, and Premier League footballers have been told that the pitch will be safer than the supermarket.
I don't normally do this, but the front of the Irish Sun this morning, it's a sports story. Not really. Dickie, I'll box Johnny Logan's head off. Ace 82 hits back after Eurovision star slams him. I mean, I'm sure you were all about the Chrissy Teigen and whoever she was having a row with at the weekend. Or maybe it was the Neil Gaiman and his wife, if they're still married, story that was getting your gossip going. But actually, the big beef of the weekend was Johnny Logan and Dickie Rock. Did you see this, Eoin?
I didn't see any of these beefs, actually. God, I really need to get a life, actually, and start investing some more time in this.
Johnny Logan said about Dickie Rock, he's a legend in his own head and living in a fantasy world. And then now Dickie Rock has come back out, and Dickie Rock's in good shape. That body, I'm telling you, if that's how Dickie Rock is, whatever it is, whatever his exercise regime is, it's working out. Back page of the Irish Sun this morning is no vaccine, no crowds. Boris government's plan is huge blow to sport. Clubs facing extinction if fans kept out.
If Dickie Rock ends up punching Johnny Logan, we could call him Decky Rock. Back page of the Irish Daily Mail this morning is it's game over. GAA President Horn admits play may not return in 2020 and claims a dirty tricks campaign by Premier League clubs is an exclusive here in the Irish Daily Mail, saying the Premier League clubs could use contracts and things like that as manipulation to ensure that players actually do take to the pitch. And then the main photo there of Kyle Walker, COVID Wally Walker, emails fans to say sorry.
And the star from me, very quickly, game over. That's a brilliant picture of dandelions sprouting on the Avantcard Park Sean McDermott pitch yesterday, where Leitrim were scheduled to meet Mayo in the Connacht quarter-final. The first round of games, the 2020 Championship in Ireland, were due to take place the weekend, but all fixtures obviously postponed. Game over, question mark. Corran can't see any Gaelic games being played while social distancing is in place. That's the Star and the Telegraph next for you. Let's hold that one up for you. Johnson boost for June 12th kickoff is a quite positive spin from the Telegraph this morning, which is different from a lot of the other papers. And bold plan to turn new US League into IPL of rugby. A group of American investors is promising to revolutionise rugby by recruiting the world's biggest names to a new league in the United States. The National Rugby Football League, which has ties to the NFL, is set to be launched in 2022 with a salary cap equivalent to Premiership Rugby's 7 million limit. Our ambition is to be the biggest league in the world, said Michael Clements, their new commissioner, has told the Daily Telegraph. So it'll be interesting to see how that fits in with the existing league in America, and you can be sure that there will be legal challenges aplenty for that.
The back page of The Guardian this morning, there was something magical in the air. Pride, belief and despair in the summer. Football came home. It is, of course, Euro 96. Brighton reveal restart doubts as third player tests positive. Meanwhile, and in the main headline there, week of chaos. Premier League no closer to green light as crunch talks begin. It feels like crunch talks have been happening for quite some time. A couple of other stories then on the back of The Guardian. On the edge, rugby league clubs fear for future as cost of crisis mounts. And the big one, talking TikTok, Nathan Redmond on lip-syncing lockdown and starting over.
The Herald is Gilroy's timely warning. This is 6 days that shaped decade of the Dubs, and this is the National Football League final when Cork beat them 21 points to 214 in 2011. And when we have the All-Ireland someday, that's when we'll stop hearing that. Pat Gilroy spoke in defence of his embattled Dubs in the Red Raw aftermath of the 2011 Allianz League final. The media auditorium took a deep collective breath. What did he say that was so amazing? The question asking if there was a mental block that Dublin needed to get over. Do you think I'm going to say yes to that now, in fairness? If I really believe that, I should walk out the door here and never be in front of that team again. This team have character and guts to put up with the kind of stuff that surrounds them every day, and they get back out there and they train and they work. And I tell you, they're the most honest guys and they'll get stick for this. We had an 8-point lead and we lost. I've forgotten that, actually. I've forgotten that Cork came back from 8 points to beat them in the 2011 league final. And everybody thought that this Dub team were inveterate chokers and they were never going to do anything.
Yeah, that was an interesting, because I think Dublin were favourites going into that league final, weren't they? Despite the fact that Cork, and then I think the tables turned a little bit that summer then, where everybody expected Cork to win the All-Ireland. So, yeah, God, that's it seems like there was a number of actual big moments for that Dublin team in the league over those couple of years where they really used the early part of the year to actually create that grit that would be required to win an All-Ireland. I'm going to finish up on the Irish news here, Ger. Horan not open to closed doors is the main headline in their sports section. And be careful what you wish for. Owen Mulligan has sent out a warning for Tyrone fans who want rid of Mickey Hart.
Be careful what you wish for.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, okay. That's the end of our newspapers there this morning. If you